Next to a great forest, there lived a poor woodcutter with his 2 children and their mean stepmother. The boy's name was Hansel, and the girl's name was Gretel. They had very little to eat, and once, when a great famine came to the land, the poor woodcutter could no longer provide even daily bread for his family. One evening, as he was lying in bed worrying about his problems, he sighed.
I have an idea,
answered the mean stepmother.
Early tomorrow morning, we will take our 2 children out into the thickest part of the woods, make a fire for them, and give each of them a little piece of bread, and then leave them by themselves and go off to work. They will not find their way back home, and we will be rid of them.
No way,
said the father.
I won't do that. How could I abandon my own children alone in the woods? Wild animals would tear them to pieces.
Oh, you fool,
she said.
Then all 4 of us will starve.
She was so convincing that he considered her idea. The 2 children hadn't been able to fall asleep because they were so hungry. Listening through the door, they heard what their stepmother said to the father. Gretel cried bitter tears and said to Hansel,
"It is over for us."
Be quiet, Gretel,
said Hansel.
And don't worry, I know what to do.
As soon as his father and stepmother had fallen asleep, Hansel got up, pulled on his jacket, opened the door, and crept outside. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles in front of the house were glistening like silver coins. Hansel bent over and filled his jacket pockets with the pebbles, as many as would fit. He went back into the house and said,
"Don't worry, Gretel. Sleep well. Everything will be all right."
Then he went back to bed. In the wee hours of the morning, even before sunrise, the stepmother came and woke the 2 children.
"Get up, you lazy bones. We're going into the forest to fetch wood."
She gave each one a little piece of bread, saying,
"Here is something for midday. Don't eat it any sooner, for you'll not get any more."
Altogether, they set forth into the woods. After they had walked a little way, Hansel began stopping again and again and looking back toward the house. The father said,
"Hansel, why are you stopping and looking back? Pay attention now, and don't forget your legs beneath you." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at our white cat that is sitting on the roof. She misses us already."
The truth was that Hansel had not been looking at his cat, but instead had been dropping the shiny white pebbles from his pocket onto the path. When they arrived in the middle of the woods, their father had Hansel and Gretel gather some wood. They gathered together some twigs and piled them as high as a small mountain. The twigs were set afire, and when the flames were burning well, the stepmother said,
"Lie down by the fire and rest. We will go into the woods to cut wood. When we are finished, we will come back and get you."
Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. When midday came, they each ate their little piece of bread to curb the hunger. After they had sat there a long time, their eyes grew weary and closed, and they fell sound asleep. When they finally awoke, it was night. Gretel began to cry and said,
"How will we get out of the woods?"
Hansel comforted her.
"We'll wait a little more until the moon comes up, and then we'll find our way."
After the full moon had come up, the white pebbles glistened like newly minted coins, showing them the way. Hansel took his little sister by the hand to follow the path. They walked the entire night. They reached their father's house when morning broke, and they knocked on the door. When their stepmother opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said,
"You bad little children. Why did you sleep so long in the woods? Your father and I thought you did not want to come back.
But their father was overjoyed when he saw his children once more, for he had not wanted to leave them alone. Not long afterward, they again ran out of food, and as before, the children overheard their stepmother.
We have again eaten up everything. We only have half a loaf of bread and nothing more. We must get rid of the children, my love. We will take them deeper into the forest this time. Surely they will get lost.
Hansel and Gretel's father was very disheartened and said,
It would be better to share the last bit with the children.
But his wife would not listen to him and scolded him. When the adults were asleep, Hansel got up again to gather pebbles as he had done before. But their stepmother had locked the door. Hansel comforted his little sister and said,
Don't cry, Gretel. Sleep well. We'll figure something out.
Early the next morning, the woman came and got the children from their beds. They received their little pieces of bread, even less than the last time. On the way to the woods, Hansel crumbled his piece in his pocket. He paused often and threw crumbs onto the ground.
Hansel, why are you always stopping and looking around?
Asked his father.
Keep walking straight ahead. I can see my pigeon sitting on the roof. It misses me already.
Fool,
said the woman.
You don't have a pigeon.
Little by little, Hansel dropped all the crumbs onto the path. Their stepmother took them deeper into the woods than they had ever been in their whole lifetime. Once again, a large fire was made, and she said,
Sit here, children. If you get tired, you can sleep a little. We are going farther into the forest to cut some wood. We will come back and get you in the evening when we are finished.
When it was midday, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, who had scattered his pieces along the path. Then they fell asleep. An evening passed, but no one came to get the poor children. It was dark when they awoke, and Hansel comforted Gretel and said,
When the moon comes up, I will be able to see the crumbs of bread that I scattered, and they will show us the way back home.
When the moon appeared, they got up, but they could not find any crumbs, for the many birds that fly about in the woods and in the fields had pecked them up. Hansel tried to reassure Gretel.
We will find our way.
But they could not. They walked through the whole night and the next day from morning until evening, but they did not find their way out of the wood. They were terribly hungry because they had eaten only a few small berries that were growing on the ground. Hansel and Gretel became so tired that their legs would no longer carry them, so they lay down under a tree and fell asleep. It was now the third morning since they had left their father's house. They started walking again, but managed only to go deeper and deeper into the woods. If help did not come soon, they would perish. At midday, they saw a little snow-white bird sitting on a roof. And when they came closer, they saw that the little house was built entirely from gingerbread, with a roof made of cake, and the windows were made of sugar.
Let's help ourselves to a good meal,
said an excited Hansel.
I'll eat a piece of the roof, and Gretel, you can eat from the window.
Hansel reached up and broke off a little of the roof to see how it tasted, while Gretel stood next to the window panes and was nibbling at them. Then a gentle voice called out from inside,
Nibble, 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 little mouse. Who is nibbling at my house?
The children answered,
The wind, it is only the wind.
They continued to eat. Hansel, who very much liked the taste of the roof, tore down another large piece, and Gretel poked out an entire round sugar window pane. Suddenly the door opened, and a woman, as old as dirt and leaning on a crutch, came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so frightened that they dropped what they were holding in their hands. But the old woman shook her head and smiled.
Oh, you dear children, who brought you here? Just come in and stay with me. No harm will come to you.
She had only a few teeth to speak of. Hansel thought that her bad teeth probably happened because the house was made out of sweets. She led them into her house. The old woman served them milk, pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterward, she made 2 nice beds for them, with white sheets and blankets. Hansel and Gretel went to bed, thinking they were in heaven. But the old woman had only pretended to be friendly. She was a wicked witch who was lying in wait for children. The old woman had built her house of gingerbread, only so she could lure little children to her. And if she captured any, she would kill them, cook them, and eat them. Witches have red eyes and cannot see very far, but they have a sense of smell like animals, and know when little children are approaching. As Hansel and Gretel slept nearby, she laughed wickedly and said,
Now I have them. They will not get away from me.
Early the next morning, before the children awoke, the old woman got up, went to their beds, and looked at the 2 of them lying there so peacefully, with their full red cheeks.
They will be quite tasty.
She mumbled to herself. Then she grabbed Hansel with her withered hand and carried him to a little stall, where she locked him behind a cage door. Cry as he might, there was no help for him. Then she shook Gretel and cried,
Get up! Fetch some water and cook something good for your brother. He's locked outside in the stall and is to be fattened up. When he is fat, I am going to eat him.
Gretel began to cry, but it was all for nothing. She had to do what the witch demanded. Now Hansel was given the best things to eat every day, and Gretel received nothing but crayfish shells. Every morning the old woman crept out to the stall and shouted,
Hansel, stick out your fingers so I can feel if you are fat yet.
The old woman, who had bad eyes and could not see the bone, thought it was Hansel's finger, and she wondered why he didn't get fat. When 4 weeks had passed, and Hansel was still thin, impatience overcame her, and she would wait no longer.
Hey, Gretel!
She shouted to the girl.
Hurry up and fetch some water. Whether Hansel is fat or thin, tomorrow I am going to eat him.
Oh, how the poor little sister sobbed as she was forced to carry the water, and how the tears streamed down her cheeks.
Dear God, please help us,
she cried.
Save your slobbering,
said the old woman.
It doesn't help you at all. First, we are going to bake,
said the old woman.
I have already made a fire in the oven and kneaded the dough.
She pushed poor Gretel outside to the oven, from which fiery flames were leaping.
Climb in,
said the witch,
and see if it is hot enough to put the bread in yet.
Gretel knew if she did, the witch would close the oven door and eat her as well. So Gretel saw what she had in mind and said,
I don't know how to do that. How can I get inside? Stupid child, said the old woman. The opening is big enough. See, I myself could get in.
She crawled up and stuck her head into the oven. Gretel gave the witch a shove, causing her to fall into the oven. Then she closed the iron door and secured it with a bar. The old woman began to howl frightfully, but Gretel ran away, and the witch burned up. Gretel ran straight to Hansel, unlocked his stall, and cried,
Hansel, we're saved! The old witch is dead.
Then Hansel jumped out like a bird from its cage when someone opens its door. How happy they were! They threw their arms around each other's necks and jumped with joy. Because now they had nothing to fear. They went into the witch's house. In every corner were chests of pearls and precious stones.
These are better than pebbles,
said Hansel, filling his pockets. Gretel said,
I will take some home with me as well.
and she filled her apron full.
But now we must leave,
Said Hansel,
and find our way out of these witch-filled woods. Father will have missed us dearly.
Walking a few hours, they finally saw their father's house in the distance. They ran, rushed inside, and threw their arms around their father's neck. The man had not had even one happy moment since he had left the children in the woods. Not only were they missing, but the evil stepmother went missing too. Gretel shook out her apron, scattering pearls and precious stones around the room, and Hansel added to them by throwing one handful after the other from his pockets. Now all their cares were at an end, and Hansel and Gretel and their father lived happily together.